Ladies and gents, welcome back to another episode in which I am talking about Kingdom Rush and all of the other Kingdom Rush editions as well in today's episode because, ladies and gents, I finally figured I should get around to starting to make my tier lists on this game. There's quite a few tier lists that we have to go over. However, the one that I probably will exclude just out of respect to Voduke, since he's already done it, is the Heroes tier list. If I do make one later on, if at all, it's probably just going to be a troll one, just something funny. But in any case, ladies and gents, today's tier list is going to be about the towers of the Kingdom Rush franchise. Again, I would just like to preface all of these things that I'm about to say with, guys, this is my opinion. If y'all want to crucify me in the comments section, that's fine. But please understand that I am not making an objective tier list here, okay? This is all just my own personal opinion based off of my experience and own personal usage of these towers. I will admit that a lot of these towers I don't use as much as I probably should, but that does have an influence and a degree of, just as far as an effect is concerned on my opinion of these different towers. But in any case, ladies and gents, let's go ahead and get started. We've got several different tiers here, starting with S+, which is basically a tower that can do it all. S tier, which is, it's pretty much almost perfect. It's got some weaknesses, but nothing super serious. A is kind of like, it's a very strong tower, but it's not completely broken. B tier is kind of just like, meh. It's an okay tower. It's not the worst. There's just better options. C tier is just that. It's all round average. Nothing super special, but nothing to, really cry to home about either. D tier is kind of just like, okay, this is just sloppy. What are we doing here? F tier is basically the same thing as saying, this tower sucks. And F- is for the worst of the worst, as you guys can imagine. So, we're just going to go ahead and start off with the bottom spot here. We're going to start off with the Wild Magus. It has some pretty interesting abilities, I will admit that. Cost, not super great. The range is meh. The price, I have a number of issues with this tower. And again, I haven't used this enough to really say for sure that this is a bad tower, objectively speaking. But in my own personal opinion, it's not my favorite tower in the world. So for now, we are just going to put this at C tier. Okay, is it the worst mage ever? No, but there are many better options. So I'd say it's probably average at what it does. Moving on from that, we have the Wicked Sisters. Now, the real Morgan said in his YouTube video, when he made Can You Beat Kingdom Rush Vengeance video with just Wicked Sisters, he said, these witches are probably one of the worst towers ever. And I agree with that if you have, zero stalling power, okay? These have to be used in conjunction with other towers, okay? That's what makes them good, especially if you have something like a Melting Furnace to buff this Wicked Sister tower. If you're using the purple stun effect if you're using the purple effect spell versus the green one, which deals true damage and poisons enemies, you can boost the stats to 100 plus damage to 200 plus damage. The range is insane. Okay? The Nimbus Broom upgrade just gives this thing one of the largest ranges for a mobile tower. Also, something that you guys might not have considered, during the fight with Jakul in the main campaign, this is a tower that cannot be disabled by the frozen icicles from Jakul that he fires off during the boss fight, which makes these guys kind of invaluable for helping to deal with flying enemies, since the Wyverns are slow enough that the Wicked Sisters can target them. So I would say, honestly, that this tower, it's pretty strong for single target DPS. It's very good against, high armored enemies. It has an insta-kill, albeit you do need to click on the enemies and remember to, get rid of those little frogs hopping their way across the screen. But otherwise, I think the abilities on this tower are well worth it. It is a little expensive to upgrade for the lower tiers. So, lower level form, it's not the best tower, but because of its abilities, I'm actually going to rank this as probably a B tier tower, okay? Again, and the overall design and look of this tower is just super cool as well. Got to give bonus points for that. Wild Magus, I don't know how to feel about the design. Most of the towers in Origins are just kind of meh for design as far as the artwork is concerned. So here we go. Speaking of another tower from Kingdom Rush Origins, we have the Weirwood. All right, I'm not going to lie, guys. I haven't used this tower that much, but I have used it enough to know that it's no bueno. Okay? No bueno meaning no good. I personally have a lot of issues with this tower. First things first, I understand the Boulder Explosions upgrade in the star upgrade menu basically means that explosions in Kingdom Rush Origins deal true damage. And while that is invaluable and helpful against large swarms of enemies, there's just so many better options, okay? The counterpart to this, which we're going to be coming up to later on, has some really good abilities that kind of just offsets this one. This is like a much weaker dwarf, okay? And as for the Burning Nut ability upgrade, it's kind of like the dwarf's Furnace Blast, except a lot weaker and a smaller range. You know, for the price, I don't really feel like you're getting what you're paying for. It's not that good of a tower to me. I would definitely say it's not the worst tower ever, but I would probably put this at D tier. Again, just the overall feel and gameplay of it, it's not good. Tribal Axe Throwers. These guys, in conjunction with other towers, are actually pretty good. Very cheap to max out. Good damage, good range. Slower on the attack speed side, but overall, pretty decent tower. Are they the best, though? Probably not. I would probably put these guys at B tier. I love their design. The voice lines are great and everything. So yeah, they definitely deserve their tier. But they're not super incredibly strong, okay? But that being said, again, you have to think about, you know, what are you buying these guys for? If you use them in conjunction with barracks, you're going to have good damage, and your Rain of Fire is going to do more damage because the Totem of Weakness upgrade is going to help out a lot. And keep in mind that you can reduce the attack range of, or not the attack range, but the attack damage of enemies with the Totem of Weakness, which is really, really helpful, especially with the bigger, tankier foes, such as like Saurian Brutes, Blood Shells, and things of that nature. Next up, guys, we have the Tesla X104. And I know everybody's going to be screaming at me, put this in S+, put this in S+, put this in S+. And I'd like to, but I'm actually not going to. This might shock you guys. I'm actually putting this in S tier. Why am I putting this in S tier? Okay, here's the reason why. There is one ability that makes Tesla good, and that's the Overcharge Field. It is also very expensive to max out, and it has a slightly smaller range than the Big Bertha does. Its main attack can only hit up to 5 enemies at once, and at a bare minimum 3. You have to max out the main attack so that it can hit more than 3 enemies at a time. Whereas Big Bertha's, assuming you have all those enemies grouped up in one particular spot, its main attack doesn't have a limit as to how many enemies at a time it can hit. And personally, I honestly find Big Bertha's abilities to be more useful than the Tesla. The only reason you ever get Tesla is for Overcharge. Now, is that ability insanely good? Yes, against low and medium armored enemies. You know, to a limited extent, you know, things like Dark Knights, as long as they don't have a lot of HP, it can also still deal with high armored enemies. But what are Tesla's weaknesses? High HP enemies, especially those with any kind of armor. So, Treants, you know, if you're playing the levels such as Green Muck, or if you're playing a level such as, you know, Seralgiz's Lair, Teslas are really good on that level. However, they also are still going to struggle quite a bit. You need to support it with other towers to really make use of that overcharge. So because of this and those other weaknesses, the shorter range and that one ability being really the only good one that Tesla has, that's why it is in S tier and not S+. Moving on from that, we have Swamp Thing. So Swamp Thing, dear God, this range is disgustingly good, okay? Range is disgustingly good. The damage is disgustingly good. The HP when this thing is fighting on the road is disgustingly good. It has the ability to deal insta-kills, okay? And it can heal itself on each kill it gets. That is nuts. Oh, not to mention can stun enemies. Now, it is a bit of an expensive tower to max out. Is it absolutely worth it? Yes. And the design and overall look of this, the playstyle, everything about this feels great. And when it's fighting on the road, it deals melee splash damage as opposed to single shot DPS. So for that reason and all the reasons I've just mentioned previously, I am probably going to put the Swamp Thing in S+. Okay? Here we go. Speaking of another S+ tower, oops, spoiler alert, Specter's Mausoleum. I know you guys are wondering, bro, why the hell would you put Specter's Mausoleum in S+? Allow me to explain. First off, the design of this tower is freaking awesome. Love the artwork and everything. It's got good range. It's got good damage, especially at level 4. It's got good abilities. Every single one of those abilities is absolutely something that you need. The gargoyles are useful. The extra damage basically makes it the same thing as like an Arcmage from Frontiers. And the ability to possess the most powerful enemies in the game, dear God, that is awesome. So it's like, why wouldn't you buy any of the upgrades? But especially the gargoyles. The gargoyles allow this thing to deal a decent amount of physical damage. So in reality, I see almost no weaknesses to this tower, especially when you get the gargoyles. They're absolutely worth it. And honestly, if you're looking for a prioritization tree of which abilities to buy for, specific towers at level 4, for this one, get the gargoyles first. Moving on from that, ladies and gents, we have the Sorcerer Mages from the original edition of Kingdom Rush. I like the design. It's a cool looking tower. I like the voice lines. The abilities, for the most part, pretty good. A little expensive to max out, but definitely worth it. The polymorph is questionable because, again, you have to click on the sheep, and, who wants to do that, right? But in all seriousness, I love the Earth Elemental, and because of that, it actually makes certain challenges, like doing mages only in the original edition of Kingdom Rush, a viable strategy, all right? Without that Earth Elemental, you're going to struggle a lot against spiders. Highly magic-resistant enemies are going to be a huge issue. Not to mention the slow curse, once you have all the star upgrades for the Mage Tower class. The best part about this tower is the fact that it can lower enemy armor ratings. So for enemies such as Dark Slayers or Raiders in the Bandit Slayer, mini-campaign, this tower is invaluable for helping to deal with those and making it a lot easier to kill certain enemies. So for those reasons, I'm going to rank the Sorcerer Mage as an A-tier tower. Oh boy. Okay, this next one, we're going to try and get through without pulling my hair out. The Shadow Archer. Basically, this tower is... I'm just going to flat out say it. It's mediocre at best, okay? I'm not in love with this tower. Does the design look great? Yes. Dear God, what are those abilities? The Crow? Are you kidding me? Bro moment. No. Well, you're telling me I'm paying how much gold? It's like 400 for 2 DPS? No. No bueno. No bueno. Okay, the Shadow Mark is good. The insta-kill is pretty decent. And for those reasons and those reasons alone, I'm going to rank the Shadow Archers as a C-tier tower. Is it the worst archer in the game? I don't know. It's debatable. But what I can tell you for sure is the fact that there are definitely worse towers and definitely better towers than this one. So we're going to rank this as a C-tier tower. The Rotten Forest. Oh my gosh. Oh man. All right. Anyways, Rotten Forest. Cheap to get. It's very cheap. I will admit that. The range and the damage make this literally one of the worst towers ever to come out of the Kingdom Rush franchise. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't like the design of this at all. They could have done so much more with this. They could have made it a barracks troops, type tower where it spawns treants or something. I would have reworked this like crazy. Okay? Just why? Why was this thrown in here? I'm putting this at F-. I'm sorry. I don't like it. It's not a good tower. It's not. Literally, the only reason you get this tower is to flex on people and be like, haha, I bought the premium edition of Kingdom Rush Vengeance, and now I'm in crippling debt. Anyways, moving on, now we have Rocket Riders. Rocket Riders, you know what? These guys are starting to grow on me, but they're kind of like the Weirwoods, in the sense that, are they the worst tower in the game? No. Are there better options? Yes. The voice lines are okay, but it's not my favorite tower. They do have good range, though, like the Weirwood. I will give them that. And they do have good damage, like the Weirwood. I will give them that. But in Kingdom Rush Vengeance, artillery is more viable than in Origins, so we're going to put them in D tier for now. All right, moving on from there, we have the Ranger's Hideout. Love the abilities. Wrath of the Forest, muy bueno. Poison Arrows, muy bueno. Range, good. Damage, good. Really, the only thing that this thing struggles with is armored foes, okay? And once you get poison arrows, even medium armored enemies really are not that much of an issue. The only thing that this tower really truly struggles against is high armored enemies and greatly armored enemies. So for that reason, I'm probably going to put the Ranger's Hideout as an A tier tower. The other thing that this thing sucks at to a degree is swarms. And the reason I'm putting it at A tier and not S tier is because of the fact that, if you have a level that's very swarmy, this tower does need to be supported by other towers, right? So like barracks to hold enemies in place. It can't deal with an infinite number of swarms. The poison arrows and the Wrath of the Forest do help out a great deal. But the other reason that we're putting this in A tier and not S tier is also because of the expense of the tower itself. They're not cheap abilities. Wrath of the Forest, tier 1 is 300 gold, and then it's another 300 gold to upgrade it for the other 2 tiers. For the poison arrows, you're paying 750 gold for 45 true DPS. So you got to balance it out. So it's an A tier tower. It's not an S tier, but still a very strong tower. Holy Orders, the paragons and literal freaking definition of stalling in a nutshell. These guys, very, very good. You get 3 of them. They have high armor once you get their upgrade in the middle path, and they have the ability to heal themselves and deal a crap ton of true, I think it's true area damage. I think that's, well, maybe that's on flash. Somebody correct me in the comments section. But I know that they can deal splash damage, whether it's physical or true damage. It's still really, really high. I think it's like 135 on the high end for the damage range. But these guys, I love the design. The look of the tower is great. They have good abilities. Damage is meh, but you're not purchasing these guys for their damage. You're purchasing them for their stalling power. And they really do fulfill their role pretty well. So I'm going to put them as an S tier tower. They're definitely worth it, and you should definitely try those guys out. If you're not a fan of them or you haven't had a lot of experience with them, I would highly recommend you use Paladins. They make a lot of challenges very, very easily doable. All right, and now we come to the counterpart for these guys, which are the Orc Warriors Den. Why does this exist? Okay, is it the worst tower in the game? No, but it's pretty close. The abilities are just god-awful, okay? And the fact that there's 3 of these guys on the battlefield, but they spawn slower than the Dark Knights do, just ticks me off to no degree. I don't like the design of this tower. It's not good, okay? The abilities are not good. The gold is not worth it that you're spending on these guys. I'm putting them in F tier. No bueno. Okay, Orc Shaman. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about this. Some people say it's a good tower. Most others say it sucks. I am of the opinion that this tower is good if you have the abilities maxed out. But to be quite frankly honest, the thing that really puts this in a lower tier is the damage range. Okay, like most things in Kingdom Rush Vengeance, it's all RNG based. On the low end, you have almost little to no damage at level 4. I think it's like 38 damage. Correct me if I'm wrong. And at level 4, on the upper end, it's like over 200. That range gap is ridiculous. Is the range good? Yes. Are the abilities great? Yes, but they're also expensive. And the one where you can heal your allies is just pretty much useless. It's like, why would you purchase this? The splash damage from the Chain Lightning, that's good. It's kind of like a mini Tesla overcharge. So I do like that, but the area of effect is pretty small. The Meteor's ability is probably its best one. Is this the worst mage ever? I don't know. I really don't know. It's hard to say, guys. But I would probably put this as a D tier tower. Again, it's only good if you max it out, and there's just better options. Necromancer Tower. All right. Everybody's going to hate me for my opinion on this one. I honestly think this tower is quite overrated. Why do I think it's overrated? Okay, so you have a fast attack speed, you have good range, decent damage. It's not the highest, though. And by the time you unlock it, you're going up against a bunch of enemies that can summon more enemies. It's just a very spammy second part of the main campaign. When is there really a good time to use Necromancers? Well, people are going to argue with me that, Kingdom Rush Frontiers is very anti-barracks, and having a Necromancer tower that basically deals magic damage while providing some stalling power, is nice and everything. Those skeletons last about as long in a fight as me if I took off my shoe and threw it at Mike Tyson's head. Okay, this tower is very overrated. It struggles against a lot of armored enemies, even though it is a magic tower. Like, if you had this in the early game for, the Gates of Nazar and everything versus the Arcmage, it would be so much better. And it would make so much more sense, too, because you can stop Dune Terrors, you can halt Desert Archers, you can stall Immortals and Dune Raiders and Scorpions. But instead, we get Arcmage, which, yeah, it's got a lot of damage and everything, but we'll get to that later in a second. My point being, this doesn't belong in the Act of the Campaign where it's unlocked, if that makes sense. So by the time you unlock this tower, it's not really that useful in my opinion. And the abilities are good, I will give it that. The Death Knight and the poison, the toxic poison clouds, those are good. But overall, this tower is not the best mage out there. But for all of its advantages and everything, and I know a lot of people would be disgusted with me if I put it any lower, I'm going to put this as a B tier tower. Musketeers. Alright, so initially my opinion of these guys was they suck when I first played this game, back all the way in 2011, and my opinion has changed a little bit since. I have learned to respect Musketeers, okay? Shrapnel Shot is good. Shrapnel Shot, muy bueno. And the fact that you have an insta-kill that can reach outside the range of the tower itself is pretty handy. So, for those reasons, this tower already shoots up to at least B tier on my eyes. Or in my eyes, I should say, excuse me. But as far as the price is concerned, let's talk about that. So, you have more damage per hit, faster projectile speed, so less chance of missing. So that already kind of gives it a slight edge over Ranger's Hideout. But like the Ranger's Hideout, the abilities are quite expensive. Are they worth it? Absolutely. But are you willing to spend all that gold when you could just get yourself another tower? That's the question. And what are the weaknesses of the Musketeer? The Musketeer actually has quite a few weaknesses, despite its ability to insta-kill and deal shrapnel shot damage once you buy that upgrade. On its own, as a tower, if you just buy a Musketeer garrison, but you don't get the upgrades, it's not that good. Yeah, again, you have superior range and projectile speed, so you're not going to miss as many shots, but still. The overall design of this tower looks pretty good. I'm going to put them on the same tier as the Ranger's Hideout. Okay. Next up, we have the Melting Furnace. I like the design of the tower, but they need to rework this a little bit. It's basically like a weaker dwarf. I find the abilities to be extremely useful, but the area of effect for those abilities, like buffing towers around it, what is that range? They basically have to be like almost right on top of the tower spot that they're next to. Or it doesn't, apply the effect. There's not really a lot of good spots for a Melting Furnace in Kingdom Rush Vengeance. So, do you feel like using a tower that gives you the ability to deal with enemies and ignore 70% of armor on each hit at level 4? Yeah, it's pretty nice. But is it worth it? Is it worth it to buy this tower? There's really only 2 or 3 levels, I think, that justify the use of this tower. And there's a lot of other better options, but it still is better than, I would say, something like the Weirwood or the Rocket Riders. I'm going to put this as a C tier tower. Knights Templar. All right. I can already just imagine the comment section right now screaming at me. This is one of the worst barracks ever. It's immediately going into F tier. So you can increase the HP so that they, postpone the inevitable. And you can give them the chance to revive. The bleeding, damage is kind of nice, but that is like the one useful ability that these guys have. The game just, it's not a well-balanced tower. And the other thing is, I feel like this tower would do better if it was in, like, Kingdom Rush 1 or even Kingdom Rush Origins. I love the design of the tower, though. The artwork looks cool, so it gets some bonus points for that. I like the voice lines and everything, but just in terms of actual gameplay and stuff, this tower is not that good. Here we go. Up next, we have the Infernal Mage. The Infernal Mage, the first mage tower that we get in Kingdom Rush Vengeance. I'm not going to lie, guys. This damage is pretty decent. However, the range is atrocious. It barely goes up at all when you upgrade the tower. The abilities are meh. The Lava Geysers are probably the most useful one. The rune that removes magic resistance or armor, I think it's armor. I'd honestly have to look at it, but it's been a while since I've used the abilities on this tower. But I would say the abilities for this do not justify the cost. It's quite expensive to get this thing maxed out, and it really is not that good against swarms of enemies, despite the abilities that it has. I would probably say it's still more viable than an Orc Shaman. Like, realistically speaking, maxed out, this is probably the same tier as the Orc Shaman. Slightly better, but still same tier. High Elven Mages. Dear God. Why? Why is... What is it with most of the towers in Origins? It's either they are super good or super bad. I gotta put this at the same tier as the Infernal Mage, okay? The damage is arguably even worse than the Infernal Mage. But the High Elven Mage has sentinels that you can send out at range to attack, which kind of, increases slightly the range of the tower itself because it can attack enemies sooner than the Infernal Mage can. But, I mean, the abilities are somewhat expensive. The range is meh. The damage is, like, what even is the damage? The fact that you're splitting it up amongst 3 targets is just dumb. I don't understand. I get that the other, level 1, 2, 3 towers do that. No, please don't do that for the level 4 towers. For the love of God, consolidate your firepower into a single bolt of magic and yeet it at the enemy. Don't do this, stupid split up into 2, 3, 4 projectiles that are weaker and, maybe they'll hit where you want them to and maybe they won't. No, that's no bueno. All right, moving on from that. I'm growing frog and angry, folks. I apologize. Grim Cemetery. Having a barracks that can spawn up to 5 units at a time is pretty nice. It's a decent amount of a meat shield. And it's pretty cheap to, max out as well. It's got good range, especially at level 4. The zombies themselves at levels 1, 2, and 3, you're not getting them for their damage, that's for sure. You're just getting them for the cheap stalling ability. And in that, this tower actually does pretty darn well. I actually really like this tower. I like the design of it. The only issue that I have with it is the fact that it doesn't allow you to control where the zombies will spawn. All right? So if an enemy dies near the tower, it'll spawn a zombie. But if they don't, it's not going to spawn a zombie. And you can't control where that zombie spawns or moves to. The other thing is sometimes this tower is kind of glitchy on Steam in that zombies will literally just spawn like off the path. I'm not even joking. It's happened before. I'll show you guys screenshots later if you want. But seriously, this tower is sometimes buggy. But other than that, I don't really see a lot of glaring issues with this tower. It's strong. It's definitely not the strongest barracks in the game, though. But for being a cheap, crowd-controlling barracks, I would say just for general stalling purposes, it does its job well. And for that, we're going to put it at B tier. The Longbows, the Golden Longbows. I like the abilities. I like the design of the tower. But the main attack, oh my gosh, I have so many issues with this. It is the slowest thing since sliced bread. And I'm pretty sure it misses most of its shots. Like, 9 out of 10 times, this thing will be firing at a target that's basically almost out of its range. And the arrow will just miss. The whole point you have range in the first place is so that you can hit enemies that are further away from you. And if you're not hitting those said enemies, what is the point? Also, the abilities are kind of expensive, and the Hunter's Mark is guaranteed, but the insta-kill, it's like you're paying 300 gold for a 3% chance. 900 gold for, 9%. Is it really that worth it? I don't know. I don't think so. Is it still better than, say something like Shadow Archers? Yeah. Is it, deserve something like B tier maybe? Probably. I would say this is probably a B tier tower. Gobblerangs. One of the few towers that can hit both air and ground troops at the exact same time. A lot of you guys are going to hate me for my opinion of this. I actually think this tower is insanely strong. The real Morgan doesn't like them. I disagree strongly with this. You need to support it with the proper towers. It's very, very good, especially the bees ability. The bees is basically making this thing an anti-air, anti-ground artillery tower that can target any troop. It's ridiculous. Then there's the other two abilities, which, again, not as good, but you can still upgrade the damage to quite an extent. I like this tower. I like the design. The voice lines are meh. The artwork is meh, okay. But I would definitely say this is a much stronger tower than people give it credit for. Because I've used this tower a lot, and I know that it's capable of actually doing some pretty insane challenges on certain levels. You can get a lot out of this tower if you know what you're doing with it and where you're placing it. But as far as abilities go, I would definitely recommend just try getting the bees on these guys. They're very strong. Even at level 1, if you just spam Gobblerangs at level 4 with level 1 bees, you're going to crush most enemies. The one thing that they might struggle with is just high armored foes that have like a decent amount of HP. So something like the Mecha Dwarves or, Frost Giants, even Frost Giants. With the level 1 bees, you can gradually wear them down. The other thing that makes this tower really strong is the fact that it has a chance to stun enemies on every single hit, no cooldown. And that's huge for things like Nanic Warbears that are constantly charging in, or Ice Shards. Buying yourself that extra seconds worth of time to be able to help deal with those guys and put down reinforcements or a barracks or something. Honestly, a really strong combo that I would recommend is use Grim Cemetery with Gobblerangs. And your opinion of these guys might change very quickly, because having all that stalling power, plus the ability to stun enemies and group them up for the bees, is going to make this tower muy bueno. So for all those reasons, I am actually going to put this as an A tier tower. Next up, we have the Goblin War Zeppelin. Goblin War Zeppelin, very, very good. I like the attack. I like the design. I like the voice lines. I like pretty much almost everything about this tower. Does it have any weaknesses? I mean, single target, maybe? If you come across an enemy that just has a lot of HP or, an immunity to, any kind of physical damage, I guess that would be a problem. But honestly, I see very few, little to no weaknesses for this tower at all. I would probably say this tower is S, if not S+. The only thing that holds this back from S+ is the fact that it is somewhat expensive to get maxed out. These other two, relatively cheap, and the costs are well justified. But with this one, while it is very strong, again, it's kind of like the Tesla. It's not the strongest tower in the game, and some of the costs for some of the abilities are just kind of questionable. Like the extended range, that's okay. That's kind of like the same thing as the Crossbow Fort that we're going to come across later on, but still. I would say this is an S tier tower. It's definitely strong. Strongest in the game? Probably not, but still very strong. Forest Keepers. All right. I love these guys. They are great. They are awesome. Bigly good. True damaging spears. Vines that can deal damage to groups of enemies at once. And the fact that they can not only heal themselves, but also nearby allies makes this tower muy bueno. Cost is, again, a little expensive, but well worth it. I'm going to put them in the same tier as the Holy Order Paladins, and I'm going to put them as an S tier tower. Elite Harassers. My opinion of this tower has kind of gone back and forth as I've been using them quite a bit. Initially, I thought these guys were disgustingly good, and then I realized that, wait a minute, they actually do have some weaknesses against certain types of enemies, and then I thought to myself, no, you know what, that doesn't matter, they're still insanely good. But here's what I'm going to say about Elite Harassers. If you get them at a low level, they're okay. They're not great, but they're okay. The fact that they have a ranged attack alone, just from the get-go, is nice to have, especially against magically resistant enemies. As long as the foes that you're facing are not armored, these guys shred from a distance. Their range is superb. Their cost is cheap. They're all their abilities at level 4 are great. Okay? I really don't have any complaints, especially Aerostorm. That is a very strong ability. But is this the strongest barracks in the entire game? I don't know. I wouldn't say it's better than Swamp Thing. I don't know that it's, as good as, if not better than the Holy Orders or the Forest Keepers. However, I would probably be willing to put them on the same tier just for all of the advantages that it has. So we're going to put this as an S tier tower. For the Dwarf, love this thing. Can't hit flying enemies, unfortunately, like its cousin, the Battle Mecha T200, but still very good. It has an insta-kill. It has true area damage within the entire radius, or I'm sorry, diameter, of its range. It's a smaller circle, but still, it's very, very good ability. Are they expensive to get, though? Yeah, it is kind of expensive to get this tower to where you want it to be, which ideally is a maxed out Furnace Blast with a tier 1 insta-kill. But overall, I would definitely say that this tower is good. The design is kind of meh, questionable, as far as like the artwork is concerned and everything. So as far as coolness factor is concerned, doesn't really earn or win any points there, but you're not purchasing this for the coolness factor. You're purchasing it for the damage. And as an artillery tower, it excels in its role. Is it the strongest artillery in the world? No. I would actually say, though, that this tower definitely deserves A tier. It's a strong artillery tower, not the strongest, but still definitely a good tower. Ladies and gents, we are on to the final row. We're coming down to the wire here. So next up, we have the Deep Devil's Reef Mage, okay? The fact that you have a barracks and a mage combined in one from the get-go, pretty good. However, the cost. The cost of this tower is a little bit questionable. It's expensive to max out. Not all the abilities are that great. The fact that the barracks at level 4 get a ranged attack is a bonus. I will admit that. And they do attack pretty quickly at range as well. And you can upgrade the red spines so that their stats are improved, which is really nice. So having a tower that deals a good amount of both physical DPS as well as magic DPS is great. Is it as good as the Specter's Mausoleum, though? No, for a couple reasons. Number one, like I said, not all the abilities are as useful as the Specter's Mausoleum. The range is significantly less than the Specter's Mausoleum. So certain enemies are going to be an issue for you, especially if they're on the outer sub-lanes. The other thing that I would say, too, that kind of hinders this tower is the fact that there are certain levels where it's very good, and there's certain levels where it's very bad. Like, the early game of the main campaign, this tower is great. Same thing with the late game. The middle one, though, where you're coming up against lots of magic-resistant enemies, not so good. But in my own personal opinion, I do like this tower a lot. It just is not the overall complete package I'm looking for, and there are better options. So for that reason, I'm going to put this as a C-tier tower. Dark Knights. Again, this is one of those towers I have mixed feelings about, because when they're maxed out, they're very good, but one of their abilities is basically just useless, where they shield themselves and become invulnerable for a short duration. Not really that great. The ability to reflect damage physically back at their enemies is pretty nice. Dealing back to a maximum of 45 physical damage, especially against magic-resistant enemies, is pretty strong. So these guys are really good against magic-resistant enemies. The only other thing I would say is that there are two of them. While they have greater armor and they can last longer in a fight than the Orc Warriors can, by far, the cost of these guys is kind of questionable. The insta-kill chance is insanely low and RNG, so you kind of wonder, is it really worth it to buy it? Are there better options? And the simple answer is yes. Is it a bad tower? No. Are there better options? Yes. I would probably put the Dark Knights, as a C-tier tower. Crossbow Fort. Can extend the range of other towers, has high damage per second, single target, and the crit chance is also really good. Pretty cheap to max out as well. I see almost no weaknesses with this tower whatsoever. The only thing it struggles against is highly armored enemies, or enemies such as like Dune Terrors, where, obviously they're under freaking ground and they can't be targeted, or, something like a Blood Shell that has great armor or something of that nature. But otherwise, this is a very strong tower. I'm going to put it in S tier. Crossbow Forts just in general are good. The design looks great. I love the bolt barrage ability. I freaking love it. It's a great tower. Bone Flingers. All right. A lot of people say that this tower is strong. that is correct, against magic-resistant enemies. As for armored enemies, it can gradually wear them down over time, as long as you have the barracks abilities upgraded for, say, stuff like the Bone Golem and the ability it has to summon skeletons. I think it's like once every, like, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it like 15 or 20 seconds? But it's a pretty short cooldown as far as how often it summons skeletons. If you get multiple Bone Flingers down one path, you can just send a constant trickle of skeletons to deal damage to enemies and stall them. Again, obviously the one glaring weakness of this tower is its range, but that is pretty much it. You know, unless an enemy has immunity to physical damage, this tower is going to shred most enemies that it comes across. Excluding high armored enemies. That might be the one exception, is high armored, high HP enemies. But otherwise, this tower is bigly good. You know, I would probably say this is an S tier tower. Blazing Gem. Okay, I mean, why would we not put this at S+? Do we even need to go over why this is a good tower? No, we don't. Moving on, Blade Singers. Okay, I've had so many arguments with people about Blade Singers. Everybody's like, oh my god, they're so good. They deal so much true damage. Shut up. No, they don't. Okay, first of all, I understand that if you max out both their abilities, they deal more true damage, and they may or may not last longer in a fight than Forest Keepers do, because they can't heal themselves like the Forest Keepers can. You can say whatever you want about this tower, but they do not have the same healing ability as the Forest Keepers do. The other thing is they can't target flying enemies, which just sucks. I understand you have 3 of them, and they have medium armor as opposed to low armor, but they do have less HP. And they also lose their ranged attack, which, I mean, in and of itself is kind of a bit of a problem. You could argue that stuff like Blade Dance or, you know, that is arguably a ranged attack because they can, you know, hit enemy units like hyenas while they're moving still. But again, I like the design of the tower. It gets points for the artwork and everything and the voice lines. It's a pretty cool looking tower. But as far as like reasons why I would use this, not really seeing a whole lot. Also, the gold that it costs to max out all of these abilities is pretty high. I think it's like upwards of 1,500 gold. For that, you can get like 2 sets of Arcane Archers or like a Mage Tower or something. It's pretty ridiculous how much gold you'd be saving by just buying yourself other towers rather than maxing out the true damage abilities on this thing. It's not worth it. You know, unless you're doing a challenge where it's like 1 tower on a level, I wouldn't say this tower is that great. Again, obviously, I will admit, you know, having 3 units instead of 2 is nice for, you know, crowd control purposes. And they are pretty decent at crowd control, again, if you max out their abilities. So, yeah, I would say this tower definitely has some glaring weaknesses. It's probably not the worst barracks in the game for sure, but I just don't see a whole lot of reasons to use it. I'm going to put them at C tier with the Dark Knights. Big Bertha. All right, I'm not going to lie. This artillery tower is quite strong. I'm going to put it in the same tier as the Dwarf. And the reason being, unlike the Tesla, its main attack can hit an unlimited number of enemies as long as you have them all stalled in the same area. The abilities are good, which, you know, you got the missile, which allows you to hit flying enemies to a limited extent. You've got the cluster bombs, which just give you that much more crowd control over a wider range, too. Are the abilities somewhat expensive to max out after you get the Big Bertha? Yeah, but the cost is justifiable. It's kind of like the Dwarf in that regard. It's a somewhat expensive tower to get. It requires a little bit of skill to place and use. But ultimately, it's a good tower. And I would strongly recommend that people use it. Ah, yes. Battle Mecha Online. Alright, basically, like, this tower has almost no weaknesses. Unless an enemy is immune to physical or explosive damage, I'm putting this at S+. It can hit flying and ground targets. It can slow enemies down with the oil thingamajig. What is it called? Waste disposal, I think. The only thing I will say is that this tower is a little expensive to max out. But other than that, I mean, the range is good. Also, the fact that it cannot be disabled from firing, even if the tower platform itself is disabled by a Black Surge, that already gives it a huge advantage over most towers in that game, which is just crazy. I mean, having an artillery tower that can still fire despite, it not being able to move, that's huge. So I definitely would say this is a well-deserved S+ tower. Also, the design of this thing, I mean, come on, it's a freaking walking mecha. Like, dear God, that thing looks so cool. Who wouldn't love to just drive this thing to work? Just like pull up into the parking lot and be like, sup, guys? And then they just look over and they see this gigantic chicken robot thing that fires missiles and poops out oil on the roads. Like, oh my God. I will pay for one of these myself if somebody ever makes a model replica of it. Sign me up. Anyways, moving on, we have the Barbarian Hall. The Barbarian Hall, really good. It's good crowd control, high DPS, especially against magic-resistant enemies. Obviously, it's going to struggle against high-armored foes or enemies that have a ranged attack because they don't have a lot of HP or armor. It's not the worst barracks in the game. They're still very, very strong. Are there other towers, though, that you can use as an alternative? Yeah. So, for those reasons, I'm going to put this as an A-tier tower. The other reason that I'm putting it at A-tier is just because of the coolness factor. I mean, look at that Barbarian Hall. They just look sick. They got the freaking mohawks and the axes. It's a really well-designed tower and pretty cheap to max out as well. Assassin's Guild. All right, I used to, barely use these guys. And once I started, doing more in-depth research into this tower and using them more, I was like, oh my God, these guys are super strong. All their abilities are worth getting. And the fact that they have the innate ability to be invisible to ranged attackers until they're basically on top of them, really good. This tower is definitely worth it. Okay? I would say they're on par with the Barbarians. I'm going to put them at A tier. Also, I like the design of the tower and how it looks like an Assassin's Guild type thing, because that's basically what it is. The Arcmage Tower. Super underrated. Super, super, super underrated. I don't think people realize how strong this is. Everybody's like, oh my God, Necromancer is so much better. No, it's not. No. I like the abilities of this thing. It's all about crowd control and single target DPS. You got to think about it. So you can store up to 3 magic bolts. And each one of these can deal up to 160 damage, I think, with maxed out star upgrades. If you have the Brilliance upgrade, if I remember correctly. And on top of that, you have a Twister that can deal area magic damage. And then you've got the Critical Mass, which gives all the bolts a chance to deal an extra up to a maximum of 90 area magic damage. Which is just absolutely insane. So you can push enemies back down the path, keep sending splash damage at them, and you have high single target DPS magic bolts. This tower is probably an S tier tower, in my opinion. The fact you can push enemies back, it's got good crowd control. There's just a lot to recommend this tower. Also, the range is pretty good, pretty cheap to get at level 4. It's well worth it. Here we go, the Druid Henge. This tower I kind of have some mixed feelings about. Is it the worst artillery tower in the game? No. It's better, honestly, than the Melting Furnace, in my opinion, because you have stalling. The bears are nice. A little expensive to max out, though. I would say the overall design of this tower is pretty good. I like the gameplay style and the fast attack mechanic. So I would say this tower is probably B tier. Arcane Wizards. Okay, a lot of people are going to hate me for my opinion on this tower. I don't think it's great. It's not the worst mage in the world, but it's definitely not the best either. I'm going to say these guys are C tier. While the range and damage are good, the abilities are expensive, and this thing, more often than not, wastes its abilities on just weak enemies. It's very difficult to use. It's a high skill cap. And that's not, the reason I'm hating on it, but I just feel like this tower is super overrated. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's so good. I don't agree with that. As a magic tower that deals high single target DPS on its own, yeah, sure, it fulfills that role pretty well. But in a game like Kingdom Rush, the original edition, where you're facing lots of swarms and stuff, there's just better options. Sorcerer's Mage is a much more viable option in my opinion, because why deal with armored enemies by just straight up killing them when you can lower their armor rating, and then that way you can use more towers like Ranger's Hideout, Tesla, other towers like the Holy Orders or Barbarians. It's just going to make it that much easier for those other towers to kill enemies as opposed to just relying on just the Arcane Wizards to do the job. And maybe they'll target them and maybe they won't because of all the swarms surrounding the area. So, is this the worst mage in the world? I don't think so, but it's definitely not the best either. And now, ladies and gents, we go on to the final tower, Arcane Archers. They're going straight to S+. And I know you're probably thinking, whoa, why S+? Let me explain. First things first. Number 1, these guys can remove magic resistance. Number 2, they have good range damage. Number 3, they have the ability to target up to 2 enemies at once. Number 4, after lowering said magic resistance, they can deal area magic damage with burst arrows and put bigger targets to sleep with slumber arrows. I see few weaknesses or problems with this tower, if any at all. So the design of this tower, though, it looks super cool. It's almost like a modern looking tower. I don't know why, it just looks very futuristic. Despite it being in like the ancient medieval Elven age. It's just a cool looking tower too. So it's got all the bonus points in my book. And ladies and gents, with that is my tier list of all the Kingdom Rush towers in the franchise, excluding the bonus towers, of course, because those are only towers that are used in like 1 or 2 levels, and honestly, it's kind of hard to judge those. I might make a separate tier list for those eventually, but in any case, ladies and gents, that's it for this one. Let me know what you guys think, if you agree or disagree with any of these placements down in the comment section below. Just, guys, please, again, keep in mind this is not an objective tier list. This is a personal opinion tier list. So, yeah, in any case. Hopefully, I'll see you guys all in the next YouTube video. This is PollixWise. Peace out.